Welcome to the second Q&A video. Thank you for all the questions, it was really fun answering them. I've answered as much as I could, sorted from top comments. Let's get right into it. With regards to global servers, is it better to park your main at 1400 or 1415? If you could pick one class to buff and one class to nerf, who would it be? And what would you do to it? So with Valton going to be released on May, I think just taking your time and leveling it up to as far as you could to 1415. So if I were you guys, I would park to 1415 with maybe 333 engraving to make sure that I can try Valton when it releases. So before going to the nerf and buff, I personally think players' mechanical skill takes the biggest role, so I've never thought of nerfs and buffs while playing almost every single class. But for fun's sake, I think buff would be Destroyer being a little bit more versatile, and nerf making Sork's playstyle a little harder because her playstyle is so easy for a lot of damage. Again, I think NA people should not worry about nerfs and buffs, but instead focus playing their classes correctly first. What classes are best suited for soloing and doing carries and bussing? So again, answering the same question before, it is really up to your mechanical skills. Even if you play the best class and you're actually bad at it, there's no way you can buss. Most people practice bussing with their best characters, the characters that they're most comfortable with, instead of the meta characters, etc. There's a side comment saying try Bard. There are actually DPS Bard buses. That's because they only play Bard. They don't play any other DPS characters. But that's a very rare case. But I wanted to point out that bussing is almost 90% mechanical skills in your ability to play the game well. But if I had to pick, but if I actually had to pick classes, it would be a class that actually does stagger really easily. And one of them is a Gun Lancer, and maybe a transformation classes like Shadow Hunter. What sort of DPS increase can you expect from having level 11 and level 12 skills from 55 and 60 respectively? So level 11 and level 12 skills actually make a big difference. I asked a friend who actually does a lot of math into this, and he said that level 11, from 10 to 11, it's about 8 to 10% damage increase, and 11 to 12 is about extra 5% damage increase. This is why it takes you so long from reaching 55 to 60, because 59 to 60 is about 78 million experience points. But you don't need to rush into this because this particular area is designed for you to just take your time and level slowly by running raids and etc. How much does attack power reduction negative engraving affect? Is it worth to reroll ability stone to change the negative engraving? So negative engraving is just a very annoying engraving. And most people just hate having it. Obviously, if you press the P button and looking at your engraving, you see like a red bar. People might not look good into it, and then you actually don't want that either, right? But the actual percentage is about 2 to 3%. And think about if you have a red engraving for attack power, everything you do, whatever you do, you're gonna do 2% less damage. It doesn't matter what you do. So that kind of sounds annoying. And if people are okay with that, I guess you can keep it. But if you're not okay with it, you can spend accordingly to change that. Does debuffs apply to all party on raid groups, or is it just applied to debuff first party only? To cover the synergies again, it is party only. For example, a Lance Master, for example, War Dancer's Wind's Whisper, or your crit synergy, all that stuff is going to be party only. You can tell that by Bard and Paladins when they're doing the Awakening. It does not impact the whole raid, it impacts the party that they're in. The only thing that affects the whole raid is your battle items like Dark Bombs. Hey, has the director spoken of buffing the weaker classes such as Scrapper? In addition, are there any news on potential reworks of said classes? So first of all, most people think Scrapper is weak, not the director. Hasn't ever said Scrapper is going to be reworked. Director also said they're going to rework classes that their identity gauge is a little bit older. And it does fall into the category of Scrapper, but he has never said Scrapper yet. So it's more of a rumor for Scrapper, so you don't have to. So again, there are no news on potential reworks of set classes until maybe April 13th when there's a test server coming out. So until then, there's really not much news about this. How does making alts in a different server benefits my main? Do I grind all that and mail over the gold? I've heard a lot of people talking about it, so I guess it's efficient. I understand how it works. So I don't do this because I think it's a waste of time. If you have different accounts or different characters in a server, you will have to do the collectibles all over again. And I don't want to do that. Also, at the same time, you have to log in a different account, or you have to log in a different server, right? For transferring, the buyer usually put like a gem up for a certain price, and the seller usually buy that gem. So most people with multiple accounts, they make a lot of gold and they buy like a gem from the main character that they're trying to funnel the gold to. You can do it if you want, but I think it's just a huge waste of time. I think I would just work on the collectibles or like any life skills or anything else that I could do with the actual main character. Is there a specific boat and best crew members people should be pursuing? Any advice what to do with the different pirate currencies in the game? So the pirate currencies, you can buy different collectibles with it, like the Guyana coins, etc. You can probably find like a wiki or a good guide that what kind of items are out there. Keeping those pirate currencies in a box is very important because you don't need to open them. You can actually just keep it in the box and use it accordingly. For example, I had to do like a travel merchant, and the travel merchant came and it required like 6,000 Guyana coins, and I didn't have any of them, but I had like 50 boxes, right? So I could just buy it right there. So you never know when you need them. So keep it in the box for a bit until you're actually sure of buying every collectibles that you could with the other tokens. And as for the boat, as for newbies, S-Talk level 7 and 8, just to freely gained crew members are good. For example, if you befriend Kels, he joins as a crew member. And some of the other reports, they join as a crew member as well. And way later, if you build like an Astray, it requires a lot of coins to buy a bunch of crew members. And some of them are strongholds. You can take a look in that, but that's so far in the end game that you can just take your time to buy them. But the best ship is Astray level 10 with the 3 Relic crew members and the 2 legendary crew members. Is there a benefit of saving rift pieces for South Fern perhaps? Should a character have multiple best install engraving 9s so they can complement their accessories better? For rift pieces, this is more of a financial question, so it's a little bit harder to answer. You gotta think about what the benefit is when South Fern comes out, and the markets are different there, so I kind of quite can't give a good advice to it. If you would like to get rid of treasure maps quickly, you could. For example, I think South Fern treasure maps doesn't really make a big difference, so I think it's ultimately up to you to what to do with it. And as for best in slot engraving to 9, I think that's pretty good because you have more options to move around your nodes to buy better accessories. If it doesn't cost you that much, you can try different options. Was I wondering what makes more sense, pushing your main from 1385 to 1400 or pushing an ult to 1370? So pushing an ult or pushing your main to a certain eye level is a question that I always get during my stream as well. It is different per player. Determine what you're actually going to gain by doing these kind of pushes. Are you gonna make more silver? Are you gonna make more gold? Are you gonna enjoy new content? So since it's different per people, you will need to ultimately decide on that. What is a class or build that nobody plays but you would absolutely recommend trying? If nobody plays the class, I would actually not recommend trying. But statistically, Deadeye is the lowest, but they have no problem clearing the end raid, so maybe you can look into that one. What is the best negative engraving to have? I'm guessing it's movement speed reduction, since even if you play support, you get 15% of your attack power. Assuming you're playing support, 15% of your attack power, that's actually very minimal. So even if you have attack power decrease, it actually doesn't matter. I actually had minus attack power for like the longest time on my bard. It's less than raw percentages. At the same time, movement speed is also fine. But as for support, that is best to have is actually your defense decrease when you have heavy armor. Because I don't know if it's like a bug, but when you have heavy armor, the defense reduction kind of negates itself. So it doesn't really impact your vital point as much as expected. So when most people roll stones, they usually take negative defense if they're supports. And if they would have to take a negative engraving, they take something like movement speed reduction for DPS. Is the lead experienced players achieved from having previous game knowledge on NAEU launch significant enough snowball into late game? A lot of more hardcore players experiencing FOMO not having 500k, 1 million raw gold because they lack that knowledge. It would be great to hear the experienced character player refer whether it's not actually matters. Discussion gets talked about on my stream a lot, so if you ever come and talk about it, we can always have a conversation about this. Sometimes you will not enjoy content at day one. For example, when Balton comes out, you may be a little bit later on getting the gear score up to that point or having a decent engraving up to that point. For example, even myself, when Broshaza came out, I challenged Broshaza 3 to 4 weeks after than everyone else. Because I really don't have any FOMO in playing the video game. As you may know, if you look at me now, I have 6 characters that need to clear Broshaza. So I'm in the same level, or actually even farther, because they stopped playing diligently. This game will never benefit players who are ahead of the game due to hard stops at a certain point. Also, as for gold, there are people in Korea with hundreds of millions of gold, but they cannot control the market because accessories are controlled by peons, so it has never hindered me setting up any of my characters. And also there are enough bound items for you to upgrade your character, and there will be catch-up mechanics from the game, from the developers, like events and stuff, when more and more players are at a certain eye level. It takes time and patience in enjoying the game, and it will never penalize you. At least it has never been like that for my times playing. So in conclusion, people with all the gold from taking advantage earlier is in a very good spot, it's true, but it will never hurt other players' progression. I have a question regarding legendary engraving books. I am thinking to invest in them, but I am wondering how much value it is to buy battle engravings. So engraving books and investing into them. Calculate how much money you're going to save on accessories by buying a legendary engraving. And the price decreases by how much character you have as well. So for example, every single class uses Grudge. By my time, if I had a legendary Grudge engraving, about having 12 characters balanced out the number of accessories. And since I had more than 12, it was necessary for me to buy a legendary Grudge engraving and give it to every single character that I had. If you're having one character, buying a legendary engraving usually doesn't match up the price that you're going to buy one or two accessories that you're going to save money from. But in the end, you will need to read a legendary engraving to reach end final builds, but you don't really need to reach end final builds until maybe when Broshaza comes out or Kukul Seinon comes out. So you're in a good spot, so maybe the prices may go down, but you just need to look into it and you have to calculate the numbers yourself. Could you explain some basics like counter, stagger checks, and what they are? So counter is when the enemy goes blue and you use your counter skill. Most classes have their counter skill. If you highlight over them, it says counter. The tips of doing a good counter is it's just experience. Bosses tend to do a specific pattern before they counter. I guess it's the same as playing like a soul-like game. If you keep fighting them, you get used to their pattern and then you know what pattern is coming up. So it's just experience. Because for example, when I started this game, I was wondering how people are countering so well, and now like looking to myself after beating the boss over and over and over, I tend to counter most of the time as well. As for stagger checks, it's usually connected to mechanics. When bosses tend to do a certain mechanic, orange bar appears below them, and when orange bar appears below them, you will need to use skills on them to do stagger damage. And it's like different from HP. If you highlight some of the skills, it says stagger and mid to high stagger damage. Some of the skills who are multi-hit are much better to stagger, and some classes are better at stagger as well. Usually the melee classes tend to have higher stagger, and range doesn't really have. But what is more important is instead of worrying about the stagger classes, stagger only happens when the stagger bar comes out, so you gotta watch out and don't waste any of your skills. What do you think is the hardest class to play? The hardest class to play by far is Reaper, Arcana, and Deadeye. The reason why I can say this with confidence is because their vitality point is very low. They're at the lowest, and they need to be close combat to the boss. If you're close combat to the boss, you have a higher chance of getting hit. Lower vitality point, you have a higher chance to die. And the problem is when the content becomes harder and harder on the Legion raids, you only have one chance to live. If you die, you have to wait until the raid is completely resetted. Dying in this game is a heavy penalty, and if you play a class that dies often, it tends to be the hardest class. What's the difference between damage percentage? And versus attack power percentage? How are they calculated? So something like Cursed Doll and Increased Mass is additive percentage. It increases your attack power within the profile, and damage percentage is actually multiplicative on the result of the damage itself. But it seems like you're asking because I'm deciding between Cursed Dawn and Ambush Master. So instead of thinking it that way on the percentages, because it's very small, ask yourself how often you're going to land a back attack. Because if you're playing with Ambush Master, if you don't land your back attack, it's 0% damage increase. But if you land your back attack, it's 25% damage increase. Cursed Dawn, on the other hand, regardless of what you do of landing back attack or side attack, if you find yourself not confident of landing back attacks all the time, having Cursed Doll is actually a safer bet than Ambush Master. As a Sophist, I'm having issues deciding on my engravings. I'm good using Robust Spirit, Keen Weapon, and Precision Dagger. So Keen Blunt Weapon is efficient at 60% crit rate, and Precision Dagger gives you about 20%. So if you have other combat stats or adrenaline to cover up the crit percentage to be about 60, Keen Blunt Weapon is efficient. If you look at the Sophist video I have, it will probably give you a good rundown of what engravings you should use. How do you start on busing? How do you start out, and have you ever failed a bus and refunded the tickets? So I have failed my buses multiple times, and I have refunded my players. But in the beginning, it is important for you to run free busts first, because experience is the biggest thing that you need. Running a bust, as in soloing the specific content, is way harder than doing it in a group. Because if you make one mistake, you'll have to restart, and if you're bad, you will never be able to beat the Legion raid. This is a real high skilled recommended play, to a point that you need a lot of practice. So myself, I play with a bunch of characters, so I'm really experienced with the particular Legion raid like Belton. Even when I was soloing it, since there were some new mechanics that I would need to do to solo, so it took me about 4 to 5 weeks to just practice on free buses. And when you do a free bus, people tend to wait for you because they know you're doing it for free, and they know that you're practicing. It's like a win-win situation for the customer, and then win-win situation for you as well. When you're comfortable, what I did was I increased it very slowly. First, I started with 200 gold, 300 gold, 400 gold, 500 gold, etc. When you start with like an 800 gold, you tend to get nervous, and I got really nervous. And when you die, people tend to get mad because they paid for the time, and then when they're stuck at the bus, they won't be able to clear it. That's why you refund sometimes. But when you die at a paid bus, you get really nervous. And I got nervous so many times, and I kept making the same mistake over and over. Sometimes I get really nice customers, but sometimes you get the bad customers too. In the end, I think the most important thing you should do is practice as much as you can. And it actually takes more practice than you think, being yourself able to bust. Will there be PvP related content or guide, tutorial, live commentary, etc. in the future? There will be. I have some friends who are really good at PvP. But myself, I have no PvP experience at all because I have no time to do so, and it's not of my interest. But I will work on that probably. Is Spirit of Sorcerer Raid Captain viable in some classes like Artillerist? So Spirit of Sorcerer Raid Captain is viable in every single class, because if you think about it, Raid Captain gives you more damage the more movement speed you have, and Spirit of Sorcerer gives you movement speed. So technically, if you have a Spirit of Absorption and have your movement speed from 100% to 115% plus, let's say, some swiftness, it will get you to 140%. This means Raid Captain kind of converts into 18% damage or 16% damage. So you gotta do the math and figure it out yourself. Hi, I would like to ask about what do you recommend, how to prefer Valton and main engraving. So I have a video in the very beginning. Again, if I review it here, it's item level 14, 15 and 3 engravings. Even 2 engravings is okay. And then having a decent gem level 4, level 5, and a tripod at level 2 or 3 of your major skills. What is very important for you to prepare for Valton is your mechanical skills. No matter how geared up you are, if you can't pass the gimmicks, the raid will reset over and over again. So practice your skills, be more comfortable at your class. I think that's more important than anything else. Also, describing about Conviction and Judgment Rune. If you put a Conviction Rune in skill 1, you will have a Conviction debuff set on the boss, and you will need to use a Judgment skill to pop that Conviction. So you will need to use 2 skills to actually activate the buff. And when the Judgment buff is activated, you get 100% more regen rate on any of your mana or energy, and you have 15% extra cooldown on top of everything. So classes like War Dancer, who requires a lot of mana and cooldown, utilizes that. Do you think Solas runs are worth the time they take, or would you rather advise to wait and try to awaken the legendary cards when you get them? I think Solas run is the biggest waste of time. I would rather do the collectibles and wait until it comes out. The reason why I think it's the biggest waste of time is the 7% crit does sound very great. However, when I actually got that 7% crit, I never noticed it, and until this day, I still regret using the Legendary Select Pack even though I have everything right now. I could have gotten the sets that I want like weeks earlier if I had one more Legendary Select Pack. One thing about gear progression, how you set up loots in Valton, Normal, and Hard. So Valton Normal gives you the muscles to create a Demon Beast set, which is a legendary gear. Valton Hard gives you bones to create a relic set, and you'll be able to create up to 2 or 4 relic sets compared to what sets you use. That will take a very long time to explain, so probably in another video, or I usually explain in the stream, so that's fine too. And Valton Normal also gives you bones as well, so by running normal over and over for like a longer period of time, it's going to progress you against people who are just running hard. Do you get all the roster storage through investigations, or do you need to spend blue crystal? One part of the roster storage will be all open through investigations, and the another part, because there's 2 tabs, right? The second tab requires you to spend the crystals. Based on your milestone video from March 16th, you have ult of every subclass except for Sharpshooter and Deadeye. Why not all 22 classes? Why do you not play those 2? I don't have the So I don't have the character slots to make those two, but I'll eventually probably make them because people have been asking me to make those classes, and since just 2 more classes, like why not? Should we buy legendary accessories or just wait for Relic ones to save gold? So this is another financial question. It really depends, because if you can manage to get a 333 with legendary accessories only and you're able to beat Valton because you're mechanically good, I think that's totally fine. And then if you get a Relic accessory, you can just sell it. If you can beat a raid with a static group without any problem, I don't think there's a reason for you to upgrade by spending too much. When it becomes cheaper, maybe you can buy it afterwards. What impacts the most is your mechanical skills. Is it better to use full crit set from Argos in a mix of 2 crit rate and damage sets? So the answers to what legendary sets you use, it really doesn't matter because it's a stepping stone. So you can probably use anything you want compared to what you actually want in preference, because you will be changing to relic gears anyway, and it'll be a very short time. Are Abyssal Dungeons still good gold sorcerer in KR? In addition, what Abyssal Dungeons are available past 1370? So Abyssal Dungeons don't give us gold anymore if you're past 1415. So instead, what I do is any of the characters that are 1500 and over do buses for the Abyssal Dungeons. Or you can do that as well if you want to make gold from Abyssal. But some people run Abyssal even if they're overgeared, first for the cards and the engraving books. For a gunslinger, would you have to choose which would be better, Adrenaline 3 Peacemaker 1 or Peacemaker 3 Adrenaline 1? Adrenaline 3 and Peacemaker 1 is much better than the other because the Peacemaker 3 is a specific build at the very end game that isn't really used as much. And Adrenaline 3 gives you 15% crit rate, right? Peacemaker 3 gives crit rate, but it's on shotguns only. But Adrenaline 3 gives you crit rate on both shotguns and rifles, so there's an advantage of that. What are some stats and engravings I should be looking for open world PvP and GVG? So the newest content, Rune, the PvP set is usually endurance, but for DPS classes like Gunslinger or like heavy DPS classes like Gunslinger, usually use the regular PvE set with different engravings. So I would actually not look for him for now because it's gonna be a very long time, and by the time you guys will be having the open world PvP, the balance will be completely different. Why is no one going for tank stats? Is damage just always overruled by after over surviving? The tank stat is actually just bad because if you think about it, if you play a gun lancer, if you go endurance on a gun lancer, it just increases your defense. But if you go for spec, it increases your efficiency in getting shield gain. So the tankiness is still the same, but you do more damage if you go spec. In this game, technically you cannot get hit if you dodge everything. So damage tends to be the more important stat. Which raid content in your opinion introduced the Western audience to a real DPS check? I'm asking mainly because I'm using heavy armor 3 on my eye level 1340 Deathblade and I don't want to get rid of it as long as possible. The real DPS check raid is starting from Valton. And when Valton comes out, there's going to be a DPS check because it will give you about 12 to 15 minutes before he goes berserk. You can't really beat Valton when he goes berserk because you die in like a couple hits. Don't worry about taking off heavy armor 3 though, because the reason why DPS checks exist is because the players are not mechanically good at the game instead of their builds. Their builds only help them hit less. So if Valton requires you to hit them 10 times, but if you're not used to the game and only hit them 5 times, you will need to back that up with your spec. So that's all. It's always been like that. That's why in the beginning, when new raids come out, even for Korea, like they're not used to dodging the mechanics, they hit less. So what they do is they increase their builds even more, they increase their specs even more to hit less and try to dodge more. But when later on, when everyone gets experience at the patterns, they tend to hit more. They use their skills more. If the skills go on rotation 100% of the time, even if you have a small spec, you tend to beat the raid often. So I think it's very important for you to learn the mechanics and dodge everything with a heavy armor 3 on, and then later on when you get comfortable you can always change it afterwards. There will be a time for you to change and be greedy to damage if you start dodging everything. Right now people are comfortable with heavy armor, and that's totally fine because getting hit sucks, and getting hit and then if you die, that also sucks. You want to practice, right? So playing with a heavy armor is actually really recommended to actually get better at the game. Do you have any opinion on Romat? What should they bring? What kind of aspects are missing in the game that would give more hype to play the game? For Korea, they're focusing on story mode right now, and there are some new stories coming. They're actually finally continuing with the story. I'm not a super story guy, but I'm excited to see like the end point or like the story like continuing. So I guess that brings me the hype. If you have a lot of supports, yes, but supports tend to go 3-3-3 or 4-3s, and that can be covered by accessories and stones only. So if you are going for the very, very, very end game of the support, you will need to buy Legendary Engraving, but that's very far away, like almost a year away. So there's no point of wasting the gold for buying the Legendary Engraving book. Well, but again, Legendary Engraving book is like buying a house. If you buy it once, it's over. So if you think of it that way, you can buy it, but that's fine. Oh. It would be Nia if she's older though. So I didn't really pick both. I would like your opinion on Reaper at higher level dungeons. Haven't really found any decent video talking about it, so I would like your input. So Reaper at higher level dungeons, they tend to die a lot, and I always say that as a joke, and everyone say that as a joke, that Reaper is like, Ripper, right? The only reason is because she is very hard. She is very squishy, and all of her skills is a mobility skill. So if you use your DPS skill and tend to dash into like a pattern, they usually die. So at a high level, they tend to not bring them because if one person dies in a Legion raid, you usually have to reset because you'll either one lack DPS or have one less person to do the mechanics to be impossible to do. If you are a future Reaper player, I think you need to focus on memorizing all the patterns and like being just better at the game overall, because the game will be significantly harder for you if you choose Reaper. How should I manage my gems? Should I transfer all the gems I get in my ults to my main? So gems is very simple. You can put it as all level 5s, but if you're like a Shadow Hunter, having 2 level 7s is good. Having level 7 on the main skill is good. So the odd numbers tend to be better. So 5, 7, and 9 is a good number to have. Even I have level 9 gems, by the way, so having a 7 will get you for a long time. Having a full level 5 is actually just good enough. So to answer your question on getting your ults to main, I will work on a character to have full level 5 gem, and when you do, you can work on the next character, and then you can work on the next character, vice versa. When the honing in tier 3, should you save the 3 mass for increasing the success rate, the breaths, right? For later in the game when the percentage drop, or should I just use now? The funny answer to that is if you use it and succeed, that's good. If you don't use it and succeed, that's also good. But if you use it and fail, that's bad, right? So it's in the end, it's 50-50, you get it or not. There is a calculator that determines how much gold you save, and this is calculated in pity rates. So you do get more pity rate by using the honing breath items. So in the beginning, I would just save them all. But if you feel like using them, you can use them as well, just to increase a little bit. Because in the end, it's chance related. If I give you an actual tip on where would you use them, I would use it on the weapon, because weapon tends to take a lot more materials and a lot more gold to upgrade them. So you would just use your breath items to the weapons. Do you go to plus 20 above for your gear to play Broshaza hard? That's a hard question, because when's a good time to invest in gold for engravings, before or after Valton? I think after Valton is better. After Valton is better, or even before Kokoseidon. You guys will know when you think your damage is lacking, even if you play perfectly. And that time is usually Kokoseidon, which is 1475. Do cooldown percentage gems calculate based off the base cooldown or current cooldown after tripods and swiftness, etc.? So I actually don't know, so I asked a friend. They're all added together on top of each other, because if it works separately, the cooldowns will be way too short. How do you handle the whole thing with classes where you play multiple builds? Do them have multiple armor sets on the class, characters multiple times, not entering the armor set? The gear sets, there's a button where if you beat the raids enough and have all the materials, the game will let you change set bonuses for free. It was a recent change, and there are also presets as well. So you can change builds on the fly later on, so when that happens, you'll notice. Is any one of the 3 supports better than the other 2 when considering ultra late games such as Heart Broshasa and Hell Mode Cuckoo? It's really the playstyle. So if you like the playstyle of a Bard, and if you like the playstyle of the Paladin, that's what you should choose based on. But for efficiency though, Paladin tends to be a little bit better for something like Hell Mode Cuckoo, because his playstyle is a little bit different. Paladin's buff lasts longer with a mid-range boost, so there is no empty window of time. Bard, on the other hand, there's a lot of empty window in the time, with a bigger boost of damage. There's a lot more room of mistake if you play a Bard. There's a lot less room for mistake when you play Paladin. So for 3 supports, I think Paladin is the best out of them all, but the problem is this should be based on not the performance, but the character itself. I think it's better for you to try both classes and see their playstyle and play accordingly. Can I still be reasonably powerful if I only want to play 2-3 characters? It will be much longer for you to grow, but if you're fine with that, I still have a lot of friends who only play 1 character. I still have a friend that only plays 2-3 characters. Playing a number of characters actually doesn't really matter. Where is Korea bigger damage coming from compared to EU? Is it gear score, engravings, gems, or is a lot of small streams that make the river? Correct, it's the small streams. If the small streams is gear score, engravings, and gems. The percentage just keeps on adding up, and it just added up to a point where it generates the big damages. Can you make a video on how to build a character in T3 for beginners? Maybe like prioritize first when you hit 1345 per accessories, how to build towards our goal 1370. So you don't have to worry about it too much. Just build what you can and just play at your own pace. Eventually you will get some good accessories. Eventually you will see some opportunities for you to invest. You actually don't need to worry about anything. Just keep doing the dailies and level your eye level. If your eye level is much higher, the contents will be much easier for you to challenge. So I think just taking your time is most important. Is there any other way to get additional 6 character slots without paying? So there has been a case where Korean server, the developers gave us free character extension slots, but I don't know if that's going to be the case for NA. Other than that, there's no way to get it. Not that Lostark related, but what games you have played? I think I played almost every game, like RTS indie game, League of Legends, all that stuff. Other MMOs. I just like games in general, mobile games too, but I don't play mobile games anymore. Just wondering, is it beneficial to or recommend for supports to leave party effects on? I thought it might help with knowing when certain party members are bursting, but sometimes I find screen clutter that I can't even see telegraphs properly. Yeah, especially yes. So especially playing with Source, correct. So you can turn it off if you want. You can turn it on if you want as well. Everyone plays differently, but at the same time, for someone like Sorceress, if you're a Sorceress that cares about bursting the damage, right? They usually tell you with a macro on the party sign. But as a support, your job is to consistently have the buffs on, keep having the marks on, and shield whenever you can. So if you're doing your job properly, there's a less and less empty window, and it is DPS's job that they know that they have their buffs on. Some supports provide party signs, like as in they put it on the party message saying like, oh, I'm using the 3rd bubble, or I'm actually transforming, etc. Or at the same time, the DPS tends to leave the support effects on anyway, so they'll do it themselves. So it is your job to actually just buff efficiently than waiting for your DPS to do something. How can you make consistent and maybe even decent gold in the current state of the game? Current state of the game is a little bit hard because I heard NA there's only Argos and Abyss dungeons to make gold, so that's it. And there's life skills as well, but life skills are a little bit harder to get gold from because the prices of the fish is too low. So I think it's just wait. I think it's just playing it consistently, doing daily, sell mats, doing the dungeons weekly, and then maybe doing life skills, doing collectibles, and hopefully get some rare drops and get more gold from there as well. As the game continues, there will be more options to make more gold. What eye level should I look to start buying accessories and stones? In Korea, it's 14-15, but I think for the US, it should be above 14-45 because you need a lot of relic accessories to be in the market. Since the demand is going to be super high compared to the supply, I would just keep on selling accessories if you're able to run Baltan and Descaluda, which is the new Guardian coming out at 14-15. And the Chaos Dungeon at 14-45 will also give you relic accessories as well. How does people in Chaos server make gold? I find it a lot harder these days to make gold. So another question about gold. In Korea server, you have a lot of raids. So we have 3 Legion raids, and 3 Legion raids itself gives you about 10 to 20k gold. Since I have 6 characters, it's 10 to 20k gold times 6. So that's how I usually make 100k gold per week. But this is what most Korean players do. And I also do life skills to sell my materials for additional gold. And this is going to happen for NA as well. It's just that NA is a little bit blocked, so taking your time, selling mats, etc. is pretty important. How hard will it be to switch main after new class release on EU and NA? It is not that very hard to switch mains because it is up to you to actually hone them and then buy them the accessories for the engravings. That's about it. The more time you play, you will have more material stacked up, right? And more material stacked up, it will be easier for you to level up your ults to mains. What are the major problems new features KR players voice out a lot on the forums that you can see very beneficial for our current version? There's not that much at the moment. We're just missing content, but the QOL stuff, the quality of life stuff that we're getting is actually really good, and then it's making the game easier. So at the same time, I think the quality of life stuff should be transferred to NA really quickly, because that makes the game that just makes the game much easier to play and more enjoyable to play. Like it's removing all the stress parts out. So I think the NA version should focus on updating the quality of life stuff. What's the point of the game? I spent 1600s getting to 1400 eye level and I'm completely burned out. I don't see how can you do the thing all your characters to get them higher for no point, because they're in the same legion rate 6 times every week. Doesn't it get boring? So honestly, maybe because I'm like easy to please, but I still have fun running all my legion raids. Some people may find it boring, but I just tend to just do it naturally. So if you're burnt out, I think it's because you played a little too much, like burning out with trying to get a goal going. I think just taking a break and then playing the daily a little bit might be good. And when the Legion raid comes out, you can just come back and try the Legion raid and see how that works. So with that, I think that wraps up the video. Thank you for all your questions. I kind of apologize in advance if the answers aren't as good enough. I try to make it as short as I could. I think the question that I answered the most is, this game is very mechanically heavy. So if you are wondering about investing and all that stuff, right? I think investing the time to practice your class is more important than anything else, because if you're actually good at the game, you will be able to make more gold, because again, you'll be able to run buses and all that other stuff, and you get to beat particular dungeons with less gear, which means you'll spend less money. As always, thanks guys. Bye.